Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Mollie Bailey, who's VP International at Transplace. And today we're going to talk about navigating the wave of ocean shipping constraints. Now, trucking traditionally has gotten the lion's share of attention in the transportation industry, but all eyes are on ocean shipping, today, especially on all those cargo ships that are anchored offshore, ready to be unloaded. So, how are companies navigating through this challenging environment, both in securing capacity and in controlling costs? And what should companies expect and do moving forward? Well, that's the main focus of today's conversation, and it's great to have Mollie with us on the program to share her insights and advice on this topic. So, Mollie, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Adrian. I'm excited to be here and appreciate the opportunity.
So, Mollie, before we dive into the specifics here of what's happening in ocean transportation, and there's a lot, obviously, and it's something that's top of mind for a lot of supply chain logistics professionals right now. Your first time guest on Talking Logistics. I always like to kind of learn how people got involved in this industry to begin with. So, why don't you briefly tell us a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics, and what your current role and responsibilities are there at Transplace?
Sure. So I'm so old. When I started looking for jobs, we looked in the newspaper. Remember those? I'm originally from Pittsburgh, and I got a job. I wanted to do international. That's what my undergraduate was in. And I saw this job posting in the Post Gazette in Pittsburgh for an international software company. Well, it was a company called DXI, which later became Descartes. But I started out working at DXI when they were taking all the paper tariffs of the ocean carriers and turning them into electronic format so that, you didn't have these massive, old, huge paper tariffs that the carriers were flipping through to provide a rate from Houston to Rotterdam. So that was my intro into the international logistics world. Worked at DXI a couple of years and then ended up going to a small air freight forwarder based at Washington Dulles Airport, and then ended up at C.H. Robinson for 14 years prior to joining Transplace. So I've been at Transplace 8.5 years. I manage the international operations team. So our team, very similar to, I know, Adrian, you know Transplace really well. Our focus is managed transportation. So we do that on the international side as well, focused on ocean air shipments in and out of North America. And, we're a little bit, we are a licensed freight forwarder, ocean transportation intermediary on the international side, and VOCC as well. But a little bit different of a service offering than, say, some of the big freight forwarders that you see in the marketplace. So my job is just making sure that we're meeting our customers' needs and expectations and delivering the best possible service we can.
Great. Well, great career path there, starting on the technology side, then, the freight forwarding side and your current role there. And I must be as old as you, because I just wrote last week on Talking Logistics how I still get the paper delivered to my house, the physical copy. So my morning routine is actually, shuffling out to the driveway and picking up the paper and reading it, during breakfast. So I'm still old fashioned that way.
We are our parents, right?
Exactly. It's like that commercial for that insurance company. I think it is, we're all turning into our parents, but yes, no, obviously. So right now you're in kind of a very, volatile area, an area that, has got the spotlight, not only for supply chain logistics professionals, but all the way up to the, CEO and CFO of companies. So it's certainly, something that a lot of people are interested in. And again, it seems like every day there's a headline in the news about ocean shipping. So I know it's going to be hard to kind of summarize very briefly, but what is the current state of ocean shipping? And I guess the question as we head into Q4 and the holidays is, will the holidays get affected?
So I think for me, the current state is dysfunction junction, right? Like things are not working properly. I certainly don't blame solely on the carriers. I think there's plenty to go around as far as the carriers didn't start this. It's just they reacted to the lockdown and COVID, and I think the whole market acted so unpredictably from that we just really haven't been able to get back to equilibrium. The second answer to your question is yes, absolutely. I can't imagine the holiday sales or inventories aren't going to be, they have to be impacted. I got to tell you, Adrian, I was in a Walgreens on Saturday, and my mouth kind of dropped open when I walked in the door. And I'm not going to say, which companies, but I always buy certain lotions, and there was vast amounts of empty shelf space, and I was just in shock. I'm not, you can kind of see that at places, at supermarkets and the big box stores, but Walgreens, when they can't stock, lotions and lip balm and things like that, that's pretty profound, I think. So, it's just, it's really crazy. It's ongoing, and the carriers are throwing all the capacity they can to try to continue to keep product moving from Asia primarily, but frankly, the transatlantic is just as screwed up, and South America is not easy as well. So I think if you want to get on a vessel, you can get on a vessel. It's the timing that's the issue, right? So, you've either got to pay ridiculously high rates to try to ensure that your product gets loaded. But then there's this huge unknown of, okay, is the vessel going to sit off the coast for a couple of weeks, a couple of days? Once it discharges, how long is it going to be buried in the stacks? And that's where I think there's so many different parts and pieces that people don't necessarily understand about the international supply chain. So, you've got the beginnings of the shipment that start at origin, and they're totally dependent upon trucking capacity in the countries where products beginning for an import. They're very much dependent upon equipment and chassis, and we've seen disruption throughout the globe in regards to, you look at what's happening in Southeast Asia with the extended shutdowns of Vietnamese manufacturers. And, I've seen some carriers announce embargoes where they weren't going to call Vietnamese ports because they just simply either didn't want to deal with the congestion or didn't have enough equipment to even make it make sense. So there are so many factors that go in, and touches and handoffs that go into moving a product from point A to point B. It's easy to blame the carriers because they're the ones probably making the most money out of all this right now. To me, there's this has just really demonstrated the fragility of the overall global supply chain in my mind.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, when I think about it, I tend to think about, when you look at, a Swiss watch, wristwatch, and you look at, you take it apart and you see all those interconnected gears, right? And I think that makes you appreciate how the supply chain really is all of these gears. And if any one of those gears, is chipped or gets damaged in some ways, it really affects the way the whole mechanism, will work. And the problem we have here, it's not just one gear, right? It's not like you say, it's not an ocean carrier, problem or only, something that they're responsible for. It's really all these interconnected pieces from the point of origin all the way to destination, because, you can get it here, you can get unloaded on Long Beach, but then you don't know how long it's going to sit there or how long you can get a truck inside to come and retrieve it and so forth. Mm-hmm. And so I think it really is this whole end-to-end system, challenges that are happening. And you're right. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen, whether it's at supermarkets or even restaurants, with signs out saying, we apologize for either not being able to open or having limited items available because of, supply chain issues, right? So it's become kind of the new, excuse, if you will, or the reason code as to why things aren't operating as normal. It's, hey, our supply chain is broken and we're not able to provide the level of service or the products that you're expecting. And we really don't know when we can, get back to normal. So I think that's the big question mark. So that's the issue. I mean, so what actions are your customers, taking, in response to this to try to, navigate through this, and how are you, and logistics service providers like you, I mean, how are you helping clients navigate, through some environment, especially in finding capacity, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and to be quite, candid, our international and VOCC business is relatively small. We're not one of the top 20 players in the TV bound. So, we're seeing all kinds of creativity. I mean, you were at our symposium recently in Florida. I was talking to a customer that's using the Trans-Siberian Railroad to move product from Asia through Europe and then put it on a boat and sail to the East Coast. That's probably the most creative. And honestly, when he shared the pricing with me, I was like, that's pretty good compared to, some of the ocean freight pricing. And he said it's working really well. So kudos to that level of creativity to be willing to do that, and it's working and running. I think the other, people always talk about the 4-point, import solution where you take advantage of Canadian ports, U.S. West Coast, Gulf, U.S. East Coast. So lots of customers that, abandoned LA early on because they could just see the congestion building and it wasn't going to be recoverable. So I think the challenge now is that, we've always seen efficiency in the Southeast with the ports of Savannah and Charleston, and now even they're struggling, and part of it is just, I think, too, the lack of dray capacity, where you've got just volumes and volumes of import containers that keep discharging, and there's simply not enough truckers to even if it's just a local couple mile move to a cross dock facility, it's still, as the congestion builds, it's less efficient in turn times to get those boxes in and out of the ports. And then, that just builds a waiting time on truckers. They run out of hours, and it's Groundhog Day over and over again. We have seen, I'm here in Texas. I think the Port of Houston's done a good job of keeping up with volumes, but they're not getting hit with the type of volumes that the West Coast and New York and the Eastern ports are getting hit with. Seen a lot of people shift to air freight. That's certainly no bargain, and air freight has its own challenges. We've seen disastrous warehouse situations in Chicago specifically, where those handling agents just simply can't deal with the volume, and they're also suffering from major labor challenges as well. And then, I think the truly or nuclear option is chartering a vessel. So certainly have had certain customers chartering vessels or doing, a part share with another customer. So I think, everyone is open for any options, and things that probably 18 months ago, people would have been like, are you nuts? Now it's like, sure, I'll try it. That sounds great. So it's definitely opened the door to lots of creative of options. From our side, being a capacity provider, we've really relied on our agents at Origin to negotiate locally. The carriers have been pretty upfront that they have very much made strategic decisions internally that they were going to focus on their big BCOs, their big NVO partners. And so for the littler guys, we kind of have been abandoned. And so we've really relied on our agents to help us out with capacity as needed. And they've done a terrific job. It's on the spot rate. It's premium, but it does get things moving. And so, and frankly, their pricing is really in line with the market in general. So those are probably the most predominant things. I mean, lots of transloading, but what used to be a pretty standard type of escalated service of bringing a box into a port and then flipping it into a truck is super challenging because you just cannot necessarily find warehouse space, especially in Southern California. It's incredibly difficult. So we have done some transload projects for customers. And it's very anxious and stressful because, you mentioned it, containers get discharged in LA and Long Beach and get buried. And so you never know when those are going to become available. And then they get to the warehouse, and then we've got to monitor to make sure the empties get returned so they don't rack up, ridiculous detention charges. So it's a lot of touches. It's a lot of administrative work to keep these things moving, and it's a lot to manage for sure. The team here has just done a phenomenal job in tolerating the conditions that we're all managing.
Yeah, it almost sounds like, well, first of all, I mean, I think, you said it. I think, the bottom line is you have to be creative, right? The limited playbook that you might have had that made sense, 18 months ago or in the past, that playbook now is too limited, or it's not going to get you, what you need to do. You really have to expand that playbook and different strategies and approaches. It sounds like, even just talking about your relationship with your agents, overseas, relationships, we always talk about this industry being a relationship business. And I think it's at times like this that relationships, matter the most, right? Because it's really, having that trust, that level of communication, that partnership approach, I think is going to be, critical moving forward. And, at the end of the day, I mean, there are things you can control and there are things that you can't control. And it's trying to find that, that wiggle room in between those two things to try to keep moving forward with what you're trying to achieve. There's no getting around the cost factor here. I mean, obviously there's a lot of talk today about inflation, and nowhere probably is it more evident than with ocean rates, which have surged this year. I mean, I have a neighbor who's in the flooring business, and he told me, he used to pay something like $300 to $500 a container, and he's up to $18,000 now. And his problem is that, a lot of his orders, when they were first negotiated, they're locked in. Like, he can't go back to those customers and say, hey, you know what, my ocean rates have increased fivefold. So I need to ask for more money. He's basically going to be losing money on many of those orders. How do you keep customers informed about rates, for one? And are there any, cost measures? I mean, how are they working? I mean, what do you do in this environment?
Yeah. So, we take a very proactive approach to communicating with our customers so that they definitely understand total landed cost in regards to transportation, customs duties, when things like that pop up. So we were very vocal, really started in the fall of 2020, that you started, really from July and August, when we started seeing these lifting volumes increasing month over month. And then last fall, it got really, really busy, and we started to see, a rate inflation kicking in. I think we had a bit of a respite in January, and then boom, it just kept taking off. So just being very informative with our customers. Again, as an NVOCC, we normally use negotiated rate agreements. I think in the past, we've been able to, depending upon the trade lane, we've been able to provide quarterly pricing. That's out the door right now, right? So, if we can provide monthly pricing, we will on certain lanes. But a lot of times we're just providing spot pricing for specific bookings. And, I remember, feedback from a customer probably a year ago saying, this is ridiculous, this can't continue. And rates have grown threefold from what those levels were. And then I was with a customer last week, and he was saying, we've stood in front of our executives and said, hey, should we stop? Like, are we going to keep paying these rates? And if you want your product to be able to sell, you've got to keep that inventory flowing. So I've maybe had one customer so far that has scaled back volume. They feel pretty good on their inventory levels, and so they got really aggressive in importing things in 2020, and so I think they kind of jumped the gun faster than some other companies, and so that put them in a better inventory position. So they're trying to really wait out the holiday season to see, if once everything that gets in for retail and holidays, if we will start to see a slower decline in pricing after, say, end of October, end of this month. Because if you don't have your product, bumping up into a port within the next couple of weeks, you're going to miss the holiday season. But I also think in general, and my kids are older, so I shouldn't speak, but I think too, as consumers, I ordered patio furniture I was one of those people during the lockdown. I'm looking out at my yard. I need better patio furniture. It took 7 months. Was it frustrating? Of course, but I'm in supply chain. I totally understood it. I think that people, that want new Xboxes, that want the latest, greatest electronics, for the most part, if they, order it on Amazon or they order it on Walmart and they say, okay, it's a 7-8 week lead time, people are pretty much accepting that at this point, so I think for the bigger, more expensive electronic items, people just have prepared themselves that there are going to be waits. I think the dangerous thing for the retailers are the more lower cost items that people normally just buy off the shelf. And if that's not there, they're missing out on sales opportunities. It defies logic at times because I can see, the cost of goods of a product that's being imported. And when you're paying, $20,000 for something that is, the cost of the goods, it's $5,000. I don't understand how companies can continue to do it. For those that have said, okay, I can't pay above, say, a $15,000 cap on ocean freight, then you're really just going to have to wait it out. There is no other option at this point. So, for the most part, we've just seen, our customers and others we've spoken with continue to import on a regular basis. And I think, I know one of the other questions coming up is what I see in the future, and I don't want to speak to that yet, but this situation is not going to disappear. So, I think, for seasonal people that, seasonal importers that normally historically bring in more in the spring, in the past, they would not ship during peak season, didn't want to, get hit with peak season surcharges, GRIs. Well, they're so intent on making sure they have enough inventory, they've continued to bring in product as it's become available by their manufacturers.
It's interesting as you were describing all these different scenarios and things that were happening. I mean, historically or classically, supply chain executives would try to balance different cost factors, right? It was inventory carrying costs versus transportation costs versus labor costs, and trying to find the right mix, right? And keeping inventories levels, the economic order quantity, right? How much to order and when to replenish, and a lot of those equations are really getting challenged here. So it sounds like that customer or that client that you talked about that, pulled in a lot of inventory early on and now has, what they feel is sufficient inventory to wait out, the storm, they incurred higher inventory holding costs. Then again, interest rates are pretty low and all that. But it's taking up a lot of warehousing space. So you talked about the challenges with finding warehousing space. So everything has a ripple effect, right? So you bring in a lot of inventory, you have to store it somewhere. You're paying for that inventory to sit there, but that's taking up a lot of space that normally wouldn't be taking up. And, hence you have this, I think what we continue to see is kind of this bullwhip effect, right? Because I think a lot of the actions that companies are taking is, they're either pulling in orders or they're holding off now, but then expect to order more later. And so everyone's getting out of their norm. And I think to your point, I think we're not getting out of this anytime soon because, once things may get easier, if you will, on the capacity side, let's say, I think everyone's going to be then everyone's going to be moving in all different directions to try to get back to their own normal. And so there's going to take some time for all of that, to work out. So I think you're going to see this compounding bullwhip effect across different industries, for some time to come. So you touched upon a little bit about this, before. I mean, obviously, in communication with the, ocean carriers, I mean, what's been the relationship? I mean, how have they supported you this year? What are they communicating to you with regards to what to expect in 2022?
Relationship. So, again, we're a smaller NVO, so I'm sure the big guys are getting feeling the love from the carriers, but I'm not feeling it so much, to be candid. I mean, it's super frustrating, Adrian. I mean, my team bangs their heads against the wall every day. Hapag Lloyd sent out an email last week saying, they put in this, it was one email that all issues should get emailed to. And I think they said they had a queue of like 8,000 emails they hadn't answered. So, I've got issues that I need answered that are in that queue. And so, there's obviously been a lot of focus on the crazy detention and demurrage that's getting assessed. A lot of this completely out of the hands of the shippers because, they can't, the trucker tries to get a container out, it's buried in the stacks, or they go to get the container out and there's not a chassis, or door moves by the carriers. That, to me, one of my questions is, how can a carrier assess demurrage on, demurrage on imports that came in that were their door move, that it took them 3 weeks to get, capacity on it? That just seems nuts to me. So, I think what we're feeling in the community is the carriers are making phenomenal profits, right? I mean, they're, the profit, the revenues that carriers are seeing, and were so unexpected, and these constant, updating of the, the results of the next quarter. Hey, that's great. That's supply and demand. Happy for them that this has been a windfall. But I think what's disappointing is we haven't seen them investing in the customer relationship and support that's needed in this really dysfunctional time. Another great example, I had a colleague on Friday, it was one of those Fridays where it's, 4:00 and your head spinning because it's been such a crazy, crazy week. And she sent me the 44th update on a booking, 44th update on a booking. So, that's hard for us to manage. That's hard for the carriers to manage. And, I think the carriers, again, were probably, not understanding what was happening last fall, how long this was going to last. And so they didn't immediately think, oh gosh, we probably need to start staffing up for, this ongoing volume, as well as just how much, all these rollings and splits and misses and delays, those are things that immediately cause human touches, and people have to get in and interact and manage it and communicate. And it's extremely difficult right now trying to communicate with carriers. It's super frustrating. It's very difficult. I think in some ways it's good for the third party community because it really highlights how much we do and how much we proactively act on behalf of our customers and lobby for them and make sure things get done. Because I do feel sorry for the BCOs that are working directly with the carriers. That's got to be incredibly challenging if you don't have an intermediary to support you. And then the carriers are now caught up in a situation where there's just not enough labor. So it's you can't hire somebody off the street that was maybe a server at a restaurant to all of a sudden be answering questions in regards to, what happened to an import container, what this is the status on a bill of lading that needs to be updated because it's incorrect and there's a manifest piece count issue, again, really tactical things, but all these tactical issues build up into this massive queue of problems. And so I would love to, I feel sometimes like the carrier management, and I'm probably going to get hate mail from the carrier community, that I feel like sometimes those people are not you're not hearing a ton from them right now, except for very, very, I see Hapag Lloyd CEO, will do town halls and things like that. that kind of the mid to senior level management staff, I don't think is out there so much having a lot of conversations with customers right now. Maybe they're just a little, gun shy and not sure what's going to come their way when they make that call and make that visit.
Yeah, that's some great insight. I mean, I think that it's funny because this industry, we see it in ocean, certainly in transportation, right? It's either feast or famine, right? So right now it's the carriers are feasting, right? It wasn't that long ago that they were all struggling. That pendulum keeps moving back and forth, and unfortunately, I mean, I think where the breakdowns are is what you just talked about. I think the customer relationship management piece is something that's controllable, right? So maybe they can't control a lot of these things that are happening, the carriers per se, but I think it would make everyone in the community feel better if there was that level of support, communication, transparency, if you will, to keep everyone updated and informed in a more streamlined fashion. So, I mean, as you were talking and describing that, I equated to just like home delivery, right? Or having someone come to your house to, a utility person to come to your house to fix something, whatever, and they give you the, you just want to know that they're going to show up when they say they show up, right? But if they're not, because if they hit traffic or whatever, you would appreciate a phone call to say, hey, we were supposed to be there at noon. It looks like it's going to be 2:00 now. And that's okay, because, now I know I can go out for lunch or I can go and run some errands. But it's the not knowing, it's the silence, it's the, the being in the dark that is, makes a challenging situation even more challenging. And it sounds like, that could be an area that, if that's something that's certainly partly in their control. I mean, obviously you talked about labor shortages and getting people trained and knowledgeable about, what they need to respond to customer inquiries about, but certainly that needs to be an area that needs to be, focused on moving forward. Well, Mollie, as a way to wrap up, and speaking of moving forward, and I know your crystal ball is probably, it's certainly better than my crystal ball because you're in the front lines here, but it's always difficult to predict the future. I mean, what's your prediction for ocean shipping in 2022 with regards to rates, capacity, and everything we've talked about today?
I think, we're in this same type of market for at least the first 6 months of 2022. I do think that we will, and I could be off. And again, a lot of people have talked about Chinese New Year in 2022. Do rates hold until we're through that period? And then we start to see a slow decline in rates, at least through what's typically, the off season, especially for imports on the Trans-Pacific eastbound. So I think, I don't think rates can go any higher. And I mean, CMA kind of, they admitted that as well and tried to cap the spot rate market as well. So I think that rates will hold where they are for the most part. I think the discouraging thing is that the congestion and the just the imbalance in regards to markets and drivers and equipment and all of that is going to continue. And I honestly see that continuing for all of 22, even as rates start to come down, because it's just going to take a while. I think my hope out of all of this is that we start to recognize the handoffs that occur between the carriers, the port terminals, the equipment, the chassis pools, the driver community, the warehouses. Those are all so interdependent. And there are, from a technology standpoint, there are black holes that need to be filled. I think, probably 3 to 5 years after this, we're probably going to see some pretty incredible technology solutions coming out of all of this as people are sitting at home dreaming up ways to provide better visibility, provide more proactive, predictive types of, analysis to say this is what's happening or this is what's coming. Because again, this, when we went into lockdown, I think we were all thinking that people were going to pull back, they weren't going to spend, and the exact opposite happened. So it's painful, I think, for at least another 9 months, and then hopefully things will start to return to. And I don't even think return is a good word. I think maybe just we're going to kind of morph or evolve into just a new normal, because I don't think there's any going back to the old days. I mean, the carriers have learned a lot. They learned a lot from 2008 when the housing market and the Great Recession, and so they have learned that they very much can react very quickly when they start to see market declines and pull capacity from one market to another. And so I think they'll continue to do that. I think it's, what type of technology innovations can help keep up with those abrupt physical movements of cargo to ensure that the administrative piece and all those types of things continue to work more efficiently than what we've seen in the past 18 months.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think, I think most people, I think the most optimistic view that I've seen is kind of middle of next year. But I think it's really going to take all of 2022. And that's assuming that we don't have, some unexpected things, happening, just because, for everything that we've talked about, right? It's not just an ocean shipping piece. There's a lot of things that surround this whole process that, need to heal themselves, if you will, to kind of get this Swiss watch that I talked about earlier, running smoothly again, or as smoothly as, as possible. And that's going to take some time. This goes back to, back to my manufacturing days. It was always very easy, or easier, I should say, easier to shut down equipment and shut down a production line than restarting it again, right? You can shut it down by a press of a button and shut down, the line. But if you wanted to then restart it up quickly, it took a long time. And it's a similar type of environment if you think about what happened with COVID and the pandemic. Everything got shut down pretty rapidly. And then to your point, everyone expected that the demand side was also going to be depressed for a while, but the demand side picked up so quickly that then restarting everything again, obviously not every industry recovered quickly and so forth. But for those that did, it was very difficult for all this well-oiled machine to come back up to life. And we're still living through that. And it's probably going to take another year for it to work its way out. Well, Mollie, we could probably talk for, we could probably have a whole conference, dedicated to ocean shipping. And, you touched briefly upon air, but that's a whole other, interesting market as well with its own set of challenges. So maybe we'll talk about that in a future episode. But again, thank you for making the time, taking the time out of your busy, schedule, in light of everything that's happening to, be with us today.
Thanks, Adrian. I enjoyed it.
I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Transplace website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Mollie, you can post it there, and I'm sure she'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.